All right, welcome back to the Frondoza Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Make sure, you just go and after the show's done, you can find us on all the different platforms, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, download your podcast, that you can find it over there. All right, as we get this video together for you to play tonight's episode, I want to talk about the world's that control this world, right? And so we're not talking about the world, planet Earth world. We're talking about the cosmos, the systems that run this world, right? And you hear people point to these systems, right? And so some of these systems that we're going to address tonight and bounce around from are your political system, the government system, the legislation system, the economic system, the culture, the civic society, our social life system, the arts world, the business world, the religious world or the religion world, the sports world, and the world of medicine and health. Those are worlds that run this country. Like they run this country. And we have opinions about these worlds too, not only that. Not only do they run the country, but for some people have some very strong opinions about these systems. And we point to these systems, whether they are systems that include us or whether they are systems that exclude us. And my point to the context for this conversation is not about what this guy is saying as far as Donald Trump and the political aspect that he's pointing to, but it's important for you to listen to his experience of these systems and how he got to the point where he is in this 6-minute talk. Yeah, it's a 6-minute talk, just about. So I want you to listen, not from the upset of whatever your political beliefs are for yourself, not from that perspective. This is not about politics. This is about us as human beings and our experience inside of these systems that sometimes we're drawn to, not because we want to be in that system, but because that system accepts us because we want to belong to something. As my friend Caldwell says, one of the most important things for human being is to belong, to be included. And you know what it feels like when you're not included. All right, so I'm asking you to listen to it from this perspective or perception or your interpretation of what it feels like, not what you're doing, of the activity of not being included, like getting picked last, but what does it feel like when you get picked last, right? If you ever got picked last, not the picking of the being picked last, but the experience of that emotional part of being picked last, right? And so I want you to listen to this guy's talk, and then we're going to come back because I want to speak to the emotional part of what he's saying. So I want you to listen to how he describes his experience in this conversation around the political system. All right, this is the Frondoza Show. Listen up.
Became the 45th president of the United States. I grew up in a very conservative area, and me and all my friends, young teenage boys, were of course very conservative, and all we were excited about was making fun of the triggered people online who were crying hysterically and thought the world was ending. I love watching those Ben Shapiro owns the SJW Warriors compilation, and Charlie Kirk puts a, dumb college kid to shame, like those types of videos. You guys know what I'm talking about. Not coincidentally, this was a time when I was also bullied a lot. I was super insecure about myself, and I felt very hollow and empty inside a lot of the time. So to avoid being bullied by others, I found myself being increasingly intolerant and hateful towards other people so that I wouldn't get bullied, but those people would get bullied. And I feel like this really aligned with how my political beliefs were at the time. It was this zero-sum game where either me or them could escape this social shame, and I would subscribe to anything that provided me escape from said social shame. And as I got older, the only side of the political spectrum that seemed to accept me was the right, while the left was seemingly calling me racist, sexist, misogynist at every single turn. Keep in mind, I'm only like 16 years old at this point. I have no idea or understanding of who I am, the values that are most important to me. All that I know is that I feel a lot of anger and rage towards one side of the political aisle, and that another is accepting me or even embracing me for how I feel. From a very early age, I was sold on the idea that everyone on the left was a blue-haired, triggered liberal who hated all men, who started the KAM movement and thought that all men were racist, evil, disgusting people. Meanwhile, people on the right were openly embracing and accepting me for the person that I was at that time. And it ingrained within me almost a victimhood complex, right? Where I thought that, oh, historically other groups have been oppressed, but in today's day and age, in today's society, it is the white man who is oppressed. I was constantly bombarded by conservative messaging saying that things like D&I and feminism were going to steal my ability from succeeding in today's society. Now, I can recognize that when you're coming from a position of privilege, equality looks a lot like oppression. But at the time, I felt very fearful of these changes, and I worried about being accepted and successful in society. Also, sorry for the outfit change, I just got back from church. Now, the first time I realized that my worldview may be skewed or maybe wrong was senior year of high school. In my English class that year, we read a book about an African-American family dealing with the consequences of redlining and white flight. Now, I would definitely recommend you do your own research about redlining, but in short, in the 1950s and the 1960s, property owners refused en masse to sell homes in the suburbs on the basis of race to African Americans, who were then forced to remain in the cities. There was a huge demand and transfer of wealth to the suburbs, so the property values of those suburbs shot up exponentially, while those in the cities fell drastically. This meant that the property values for African Americans decreased solely on the basis of their race, while the property values for white people increased solely because of their race. Now, this is a clear, cold-cut indicator of systemic racism that impacts people and families to this day, and it was a real wake-up call for me. And this was the first time I realized that maybe I was wrong, and that the grievances that these communities have are actually rooted in fact and historical context. Maybe I've been misled and misinformed by the political pundits that I listen to. That was all but confirmed for me on January 6th. Instead of conceding with grace and honor like a real man, Donald Trump cried for 3 straight months after losing the 2020 election, citing baseless claims of fraud and rigging for why he lost, and blaming everyone but himself. He brought into question the sanctity of our democracy, our elections, and our institutions, and he effectively riled up his base in advance of January 6th. That same base committed violence and an insurrection on his behalf that day. And as I was watching that unfold on television, I thought to myself, wow, how can these people be doing this? How can they believe the things that are coming out of his mouth? And then I realized that up until a few months ago, I was the same way. I believed the exact same things that those people believed, and they were storming the Capitol. Now, the main takeaway I had from all of this is that Trump benefits from the rage and the anger and the spitefulness amongst young men. It helps him win elections. Conservative pundits like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro make their livings and careers off the frustrations and grievances that young men feel. Elon Musk gets billions of dollars of government subsidies and tax cuts because young men are angry at women and immigrants and not billionaires. My point being, everyone on the right directly benefits from the disenfranchisement that young men feel. So why would they ever attempt to solve it? Why would they provide meaningful solutions for you and me when they make money and win elections capitalizing off your anger and frustration? They won't. They will only provide you with new enemies to channel your frustrations onto, but never the ones that are actually causing it, themselves. It's not a coincidence that the more young men follow people like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, and Ben Shapiro, the more angry and frustrated they will become. Therefore, I think it's really important as men that we look inwards at the anger and frustrations that we feel, rather than projecting that onto others or looking for others to blame. Calm your mind, calm your heart, listen to those that you disagree with, and empathize with those you don't understand. It is not masculine to be embroiled with anger and rage. It is not masculine to bully the downtrodden or the oppressed. It is masculine to regulate your emotions. It is masculine to show empathy for others. Be a rock against the waves. Do not allow those who stand to profit off of your anger exploit you and only further those emotions. My hope for young men is that you pay close attention to the next 4 years under a Trump presidency. Focus on what material benefits a Trump presidency brings you. If you didn't get to see liberals cry or scream because Trump got elected, if you didn't get to see college students getting owned by Charlie Kirk on campuses across the country, or if you didn't espouse hateful things with the specific intent of upsetting others, what would your top political priorities be? His promises of lowering gas and grocery prices will not happen given his proposed economic platform. Trump will not lower the cost of housing, of healthcare, or your taxes. He is not working for you, he is profiting off of you. When your entire ideology is structured around making others sad and unhappy, you will not find peace within yourself or happiness in your own life. Escaping the pitfalls of the far right has made me a better man, more secure with myself, and happy with the world around me. If any of this resonates with you, know that you are not alone.
All right. Again, welcome back to the Frondoze Show on KCA Radio, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. All right, so I hope you had an opportunity to listen to that. like I said, this conversation is not a political conversation. I don't have any issues with none of the politics in this world systems. I got no grief with Trump or anybody, not my stance. My context is, did you hear the gentleman share how his life got into that conversation, right? And so what I'm pointing to is the emotional experience of what he shared from. Not just not the political part of it. The emotional state that he was in at 14 years old is what his age was. Now, the work that we do, the work that's important to me is the experience of being included and excluded at that vulnerable age of 12 to 14 to 16. If you understand that part of life, and maybe you don't, that's what I'm pointing to. So it goes back to that vulnerable age. We understand and we learn and we teach from that 12 years old. By that time, you are now disconnected from your parents. You're not talking to your parents as much anymore because of a disappointment or upset from your mom or your dad, or if you got both parents, if you got one parent, whatever that is, there's a disconnection, natural break in communication between you and that parent. And then you turn to your peers for love and acceptance and whatever that sense of belonging is that you're looking for that you didn't think or you don't think you got from your family. See, I'm pointing back to the family. I'm pointing back to the mom and dad. I'm pointing back to what the root of this conversation that I'm having with you, from my perspective, is an important view to look from. So if you're 12 years old and you're going from elementary to middle school, and this transition in life has taken you off away from your parents because my dad wasn't there for me, or my mom abandoned me, or my dad wasn't there, or my mom, whatever that story is, that story could impact the transition of that sense of belonging. And then when that sense of belonging is fractured or thwarted because now I can't communicate, my mom don't listen to me, they don't listen to me, then you turn to your peers, and now you're susceptible for all these different systems of the world that you're looking to now connect to. Because what happens is when you turn to your peers for love and acceptance, guess what? Oh, that's all trial and error. So I'm 12 years old going into middle school. I got more teachers, more classrooms, more people, and now I'm trying to figure out, where do I fit in? Who am I? My identity. And if it's not in sports, if it's not in some club, if it's not in some group, or it's not connected to your family, then guess what you're susceptible to? Gangs, drugs, predators, political systems, these world systems that says, hey, we accept you over here because whatever that fracture you're dealing with, whatever that pain that you're dealing with, you might find it in a political party. You might find it in one of those world systems where you feel like you're accepted, where you feel like you belong. Some of us is not as detrimental as a gang. Some of us mine was basketball. My transition from elementary to middle school was basketball. That's where I made friends at, on the court. To belong, to be a part of. But that became an identity. To belong. So what was yours? What was that transition for you? You see, a lot of things in life happen, right? And everybody has their own version of these stories. As I gave you, his conversation was a political system conversation that he found at a very young age. He was like 16. Because somebody spoke to that pain inside of him that had him, hey, at least, because again, did you hear that he was being bullied? So now, again, you don't talk to your parents as much. You turn to your peers, and what do your peers do? Your peers bully you because of what? I mean, that's just what our peers do. But that's why suicide is such a public health issue. Now, a lot of times when you look at the bullying conversation, bullies project that on somebody else, so at least I'm not being bullied. And he says that out of his own mouth. But he was drawn to a political system. Right? So you have the political system, the government system, the legislative system, the economic system, the culture, civic society, social life, arts world, business, religion, sports. Do you understand that some people turn to sports to belong, and then they kill each other over a basketball jersey or a baseball jersey or a football jersey that they don't even own the team? But the identity is so trapped that people, I have friends that get sick if their team loses, that their whole day is ruined if their team loses. That is an identity. That is the sense of belonging. It's not, and this is not right or wrong or good or bad. This is not one of those conversations. The context of it is to recognize your identity. There's no wrong identity. I got a basketball identity. I got a military identity. I'm a dad. I'm a father identity. I'm a grandpa identity. I'm a radio broadcaster. Like, I got a bunch of ideas. I'm a sickle cell trait advocate. Like, I have all these identities. But what are the ones that run your life that doesn't allow you to just be okay with people? I advocate for sickle cell trait. That's a whole world about what it is to have sickle cell trait and what you shouldn't be experiencing. Do you understand? There's a whole world. Some of the specific areas of this globalization conversation is information. When I grew up, we didn't have an iPad in the house or a computer in the house. I had the Eyewitness News on Channel 7 or whatever. That's what my grandmother watched. It wasn't even about the newspaper. It was what came on 11 o'clock news at night. Today, you can pull up whatever happens in another country in the palm of your hand right now and tell me you don't have an opinion about that. Tell me you don't identify with it or against it. You agree or disagree with those information systems. Technology is another system. That's a whole world. We own it right now. I got a computer in front of me. I got a computer and a phone. I don't even need the computer. I can just do everything that I want to do right here on my phone. But I brought this is technology. I have an opinion about it. The economy. We have this whole conversation about the economy. What's wrong with it? What's right with it? Who's in charge of it? Jobs that tell us every day about how many people are unemployed. People are looking for work, looking for a job. Job is connected to money. And if you don't have a job, then you're this kind of person. And we all have opinions about what that looks like. And we talk from our opinion, too. Health epidemics. We just came out of COVID-19. All of those world systems was impacted by a virus, just the same. Every conversation that I just shared with you from a world of perspective was impacted by a virus. Health epidemics. It's not just AIDS anymore. There's a lot of health things that are going on in the world today, and we all have views and opinions about it. Our culture. I'm black, yes, but I keep hearing, oh, the black culture controls. Without our black culture, why? Who cares? My identity is not in my culture. I don't have an identity in politics. I have an understanding about it, but my identity is not trapped in that. The music and arts, that's a whole world by itself, and we hear what's going on in that world. From Puff Daddy to Jay-Z, there's positive, there's negative, there's music does this to the mind. All these things about that world of arts and TV. This is art. Be on the radio. Fashion. Fashion is a whole world. People telling you got to get rid of those old clothes. You got to do this with your clothes. How do I look? Like all these things about fashion. There's so many opinions around these conversations. Traveling. These are worlds that run, people are ran by if they're going on vacation or not, where they're traveling to. And then some people feel bad because they don't have the money to travel or whatever that is. There's this whole world. But if your identity is trapped into that, what happens? And lastly, we talk about, in my culture, black culture, we a lot of people still look at the old days of where we had a village, where the neighborhoods and the families in the neighborhood took care of each other. We don't even have that today. You can't even really trust people today in that global village. Now you got people that move from other countries, and you got now the whole illegal alien conversation. Like, there's so many conversations now about what our village looks like and who's in that village and our opinions about them. So there's so much going on, and if you want a spiritual aspect of it, I took this conversation from the biblical context of Romans chapter 1, and there it talks about what this world, it shares about what this world would look like and how it looks today in the biblical context. So that's not a religious aspect for me. That is a relationship. From Romans 1:18-32, you can read that. It's shared what this world would turn into and what it would look like. So understanding that, I'm just saying, if you look at what this gentleman talked about, not the political standpoint, but to understand that his experience of being excluded or being included. You see, sometimes people they feel like they're included by their race. And people say, well, at least I ain't black. But they deal with the same trials and tribulations and same circumstances as people of color, of whatever color. We're not different. We all dealing with some circumstances, some concern, and some worry in our own version. And depending on how you were taught to handle that circumstance or worry, that's from your environment. And sometimes that is passed down through the DNA and the fibers of how your family thought and thinks. And it's not right or wrong or good or bad. But how do we alter this conversation? It's going to start with our children. Us as adults, if you're my age or older or younger, sometimes we're set in our ways. This is just the way the world is. This is just the way these systems are. You don't think that you can alter these systems. Well, it's not about you altering the system. It's about you altering your perspective, your perception, your interpretation of what's going on. That gentleman looked in his life and realized that the same bullying that he was getting bullied by, he was doing it to another population, to another community of people. You see, because exclusion is emotional, but also being included is emotional, especially if it's from a fracture, if it's from an upset. See, we forget that a lot of families that came here that are white-skinned are not from this country, that they fled their own country coming to the United States for a better opportunity, for a chance to have something for their family. But they were fleeing from their own country, from whatever was going on. But did they ever deal with that emotional fracture coming to this country? Did that get passed on in their ghettos, in the Irish ghettos, in the German ghettos, in the Italian ghettos? So it's not just a black culture. Yes, we have our own fracture that some of us still deal with. I don't deal with that. I understand it. I acknowledge it. But Farhan doesn't live from that slavery fracture. Some of my family members still deal with the Jim Crow law era. Another 100 years of being treated as 3/5 human. I don't have that. I could, but I don't, because my family didn't speak from that. They didn't speak from an upset. We learned from that. And now it's my turn. So don't forget that there were second-class citizens that came here that were hyphenated, just like African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans. There were Jewish Americans. There were Italian Americans, Irish Americans, Polish Americans. They were all unhyphenated by Ronald Reagan in 1981, if you want to talk politics. But that unhyphenated of the white skin to include them as white was an emotional inclusion wound, because now they can check the white box. But as he mentioned, why would people go by what Trump says and then attack the Capitol? Like, why? Well, because people still don't get along. People have their opinions about their stance. And so it doesn't just happen in politics. It happens in sports. It happens for some guys who go to prison and they follow that Muslim community and they find that. And they now, the white man is the evil one. Like it shows up in all of these different systems. For me, it was so nice to see this video today, because it spoke to the exact conversation that I want to have in this world. Now, with not a blame or fault to the child's, to his parents, but what was going on that his parents didn't see that he was being bullied. I don't know his family dynamic, but can you imagine in your own life of not being able to go to your parent and say, hey man, they're bullying me, it's bothering me? He didn't have that. So what is that we need to be about to restore our family? The Bible says, honor your father and mother and obey your parents. That's two different topics. Honor your father and mother is how you think about your parents. And I loved my mom and dad, and they got on my nerve. But I had to find out what that fracture was and why they got on my nerve. Now, my dad's passed away. I love him. We healed. I love my mom. I have no problems with my parents. And now I'm free from those conversations of I'm not good enough and I'm not worth it and I'm not this and I don't belong and I'm on my own. Those happen early on in our childhood. And again, we turn to our peers for love and acceptance and the sense of belonging. And then what happens when that relationship with your peers breaks? Then you're on your own, or you don't belong, and now you're looking for something outside of your peers to be attached to be connected to belong to. It's no different than why people join a gang. They still join gangs to belong to something. We need to belong. We need to be accepted. Like, we need that. But guess what? You don't need that from another person. You don't need that from a community of people first. You need it for yourself first. So I'll be talking in 2025 more about these conversations. I'm looking at the interpersonal relationship, which is the relationship with yourself first, because we too focus on the interpersonal relationships with one another. And it's difficult to have those conversations when I'm over here suffering in silence that I'm not worth it and I'm not good enough, but yet I want to be friends with you and hang out with you. But as soon as you cross that line, then we're no longer friends. Or if you speak to one of my wounds and I didn't give you permission to speak to that wound, then now we're not friends no more, because you can't talk to me like you can't point that out. And you hear people want loyalty, they want, trust, all these different things that we want from other people, but we don't have it for ourselves first. So how do you restore that first? How do you get that back for yourself first? We're social beings, yes. We want to belong. But we got to be able to tell people, or tell our children, hey, everybody's not going to like you. Everybody's not going to be a friend. Everybody's not going to talk to you. Everybody's not going to date you. Everybody's not going to want to hang out with you. That's got to be a truth. and have the self-confidence, the self-love, the self-esteem, the self-worth, the self-value, the self-affirmation to experience being whole and complete. And a lot of that is tied back to our parents, to our family. So that conversation that you heard, that can be healed. That's somebody who's willing to do the work. And some people some people aren't willing. Some people want to be right about this world systems. They call it resigned and being cynical. It's not wrong, but you're just going to get the life that you're going to get living and thinking about that life or that system that way. You can blame the system or take responsibility for your life and figure out how to maneuver through the system to make it work for you. But you have a choice. You can be upset or frustrated, or at peace and have patience and calmness and kindness. But you have a choice. And I believe that that has to be a conversation, not just with us as adults, but with our children, with our families, to renew, to reconcile these relationships, to have a level of self-forgiveness first, self-love, and then you can start to restore relationships outside of you. Sometimes you got to go and dig and look at the root of that conversation. Not to live there, not to dwell in it, but to be free from the story. I found 10 stories, 10. I found them in the Bible as a stronghold or an affliction. And I've done work around those to soften my heart where I don't have a problem with people. When my friends say I can't stand the white man, what white man you talking about? Hold on, you just can't say that stuff around me no more. What white man are you talking about? Because their white skin doesn't mean they don't have the same kind of circumstances and concerns and worries as you do. See, we discount the experience. I'm not talking about the activities of diversity and inclusion where you open up this door for me. If you open up that door for me and I'm not emotionally healed, I'm not going to go through that door. You can give me all the education and job opportunities you want, but if I don't experience the inclusion of myself, I'm not going to go through that door. Sounds good for you, not me. My environment says I got to go get a job over here. I can't be no rocket science. I can't be that type of work. I can't do that work. I can't be an engineer because I'm black. Blacks aren't engineers. We have all these different stories connected to these systems, what you can and can't do because of whatever that conversation was. But what if you looked at what was you born for? Use a job to pay your bills, but then discover what God gave you that you were born with that you can have a conversation with. And your job pays your bills and you get fulfillment in what God has for you to deliver. But we can no longer discount the human experience. And that's going to be my talks. If it's in sports, military, youth suicide, veteran suicide, these political systems, it's the relatedness. So we can have a conversation about anything because these systems are ran by people, right? There's people in those political systems. There's people in the banking system. Those are people. And how do you free your mind from those experiences so that you can figure out who you want to be and do what you want to do? That is the conversation that we're having. I'm ending the year with that because this is what I realized for myself. Somebody's got to talk about it. You know, sometimes failure is just doing what you don't want to do and you're doing it anyway. Because you're complaining about not wanting to do it and you're not doing it, so then you don't have resilience because you don't bounce back from it. because you start a project and you really don't want to do it, but you do it anyway to look good or whatever that is. And then now you're not even taking care of it. Now you got 10 projects and now you feel bad because you don't even want to do none of those, but you feel stuck. No more. So we're going to have some conversations in 2025. I got a few different platforms to have them on. And that's going to be the talks. We're going to have the Sports Collective, you know, and the highlights. But there's a piece of this conversation that we have to address because sports is a world too. And people's identity is trapped in some of these worlds. And it's not wrong. It's not right. But it's definitely something that we need to address so people can be free to be. All right? This is the Frondoze Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. I appreciate you again. If at farandi.com if you want to have more information or you want to follow along. Again, we'll be back 2025. Farandi.com. Shout us out. What's the count?